Should I receive the budget now or what? Please, after you present. Okay.
Thank you.
So please take the podium.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members. Of the constituted Transitional National Legislature, Article 88(1) of the Transitional Constitution, read together with Article 15 of the Public Financial Management and Accountability Act 2011, calls for the annual budget proposal be prepared and presented in this August House. Therefore, allow me, Right Honorable Speaker and honorable members, to present the budget proposal for the fiscal year 2022-2023 to this August House. The budget proposal outlines the government's annual expenditure estimates aligned to the revenue forecasted to be realized during the fiscal year 2023-2024. Context of the 2023-24 budget. Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, our economy continues to suffer from numerous external shocks and internal structural weaknesses, which have created acute macroeconomic instability and suffering to our people. The current war in Ukraine, the still lingering impacts of COVID-19 pandemics, the impact of climate change, flooding and droughts, low agricultural productivity, poor infrastructure, internal communal conflicts, and the now heightening conflict in the Sudan, all have contributed to the current weak state of our economy. We are working hard to put in place a coherent strategies to address these challenges and to engage our international development partners for necessary support. Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, to address these challenges, the implementation and consolidation of the peace is at the top of our government's priorities. To this respect, we are making efforts as government to ensure that the remaining articles of our actions are fully implemented by providing adequate funding to the implementation of the roadmap to further consolidate peace and continue with the necessary reforms to stabilize our economy. We are also preparing to hold our first ever National Economic Conference, which was publicly announced by our President when he recently gave his speech to this House. The conference will bring all of us together to chart a clear roadmap to address the chronic structural weaknesses facing our economy. Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, the 2023-24 proposed budget aims to stimulate economic stability and recovery through viable fiscal, monetary, and structural reforms measures. These include continuous steps for public financial management reforms and the operationalization of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets Authority as a way to promote economic stability and to improve the management of our public resources. Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, the economic recovery process is also spurred by the revitalized peace agreement on the resolution of conflict in South Sudan. Therefore, with the peace implementation, we expect the internally displaced persons and those in the refugee camps in the neighboring countries to return to their homes and engage in productive activities, including agriculture, to further stabilize the economy. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, this budget's emphasis is to prioritize the allocation of limited resources that we have to increase the salaries of civil servants and members of the organized forces, improve roads and other infrastructural projects, create coherent environment for investment, and to generate more non-oil revenue in order to avoid over-dependence on oil. And equally, focus on social sector in order to improve service delivery and reduce vulnerability on our people. I am hopeful that the reforms within the budget, combined with the peace, will lay a foundation for economic recovery and growth. Let me now come to macroeconomic overview. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, the revised National Development Strategy, RNDS, has identified, among others, macroeconomic stability and long-term fiscal sustainability as the main macroeconomic objectives of South Sudan government. Macroeconomic stability of a country is determined by a stable economy, low level of inflation, exchange rate stability, prudent fiscal policy, and a stable low interest rates. Long-term fiscal sustainability is when there exists a consistent relationship between the public expenditure estimates and revenue projection. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, although the rise in the global oil price seems to favor us in terms of generating more revenue to the government, it is worth mentioning that we are financially constrained because we equally spend more money on imported goods and services, as we are a net importers of the most of the essential commodities and services that we consume. Performance of the 2022-23 budget. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, we plan that the approval of the 2023-2024 budget is going to happen earlier than in the previous years due to earlier budget preparation and submission to this House. We are determined that through hard work of the staff of Minister of Finance and Planning in this fiscal year, the budget execution commence as planned. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, before I present the figures for the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget, let me highlight our performance during the last fiscal year 2022-2023. During the fiscal year 2022-2023, the revenue collected in the first 3 quarters amounted to about 1,71,104,985,602. This is due to rise in the crude oil prices and improvement in tax administration by the National Revenue Authority. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, the total agency spending in the last 3 quarters was 48% as compared to the projected agency spending during the 3 quarters of 75%. The total spending on wages and salaries was 113,845,966,878. Use of goods and services was about 208.6 billion. Furthermore, the capital expenditure, transfers, and other expenditures were SSP 30.4 billion, 43.7 billion, and 41.4 billion, respectively. In addition to the above expenditure, Minister of Finance and Planning was able to pay some of the mandatory obligations. These obligations included payment to Sudan, that is tariff, to the tune of 346.5 billion. Oil producing states and administrative areas, the 2%, to the tune of 11.2 billion. And then oil producing communities, that is 3%, to the tune of 16.7 billion. Oil for infrastructure to the tune of 228.5 or 0.6 billion. Future Generation Fund, 6 billion, and then transfers to Ministry of Petroleum, 3%, or about 12.8 billion. And NRA Operations Fund to the tune of 6.9 billion. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, with regard to borrowing, the Minister of Finance and Planning, on behalf of the government of South Sudan, was able to meet the payments obligations without any borrowing in the last 3 quarters of the fiscal year 2022-2023. So we did not engage in any borrowing from the central bank or from any. It is from our own resources. Let me now come to macroeconomic policies. Sorry. I'm getting a dry throat, so let me have a sip of water. Let me now come to macroeconomic policies. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, Ministry of Finance and Planning will continue to embark on the public financial management reforms and the revised National Development Strategy as basic economic policy documents, which will guide the government of South Sudan in resource mobilization and allocation to support economic growth and development. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, attaining the growth objectives in fiscal year 2022-2023 demands that the private sector plays a stronger role. It is also imperative that South Sudanese participate fully in the various activities, in the various economic activities. In addition, availability and access to credit will need to be enhanced. On our part as government, we shall continue to focus on implementing structural reforms and providing infrastructure in order to reduce the cost of business, of doing business. We shall also work to map ongoing private sector engagements, assess gaps in private sector mobilization, and how to close these gaps. We shall also support the development of public-private partnerships, PPPs, to encourage private investment in the development of critical economic and social infrastructure. The government will also work with the development partners to empower private sector through building the capacity of local private sector. Right, Honorable Speaker and honorable members, the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget is a lean budget with the theme of consolidating peace and stabilizing the economy. The aim is to ensure that our limited resources are used to implement peace and to prioritize salary increment and social spending. invest in infrastructure, and meet government operational expenses. Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, the key macroeconomic objectives for the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget is that the real GDP will grow, the real GDP growth will be around 3.9% compared to 1.5% growth in the fiscal year 2022-2023. Inflation is estimated to average at around 10.4%. An exchange rate of the South Sudanese pounds against the United States dollar is expected to stabilize at around 917 pounds per dollar. And oil price will average around US 80.7 per barrel. On the monetary and financial sector side, Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, I would like to emphasize that the monetary policy in the fiscal year 2023-2024 will continue to focus on maintaining monetary stability in the wake of the global crisis caused by the Ukraine war and Sudan conflict. In this regard, the Bank of South Sudan will continue to implement measures aimed at enhancing price and exchange rate stability, as well as the stability and resilience of the financial system against internal and external shocks. On the fiscal policy side, Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, one of the key objectives of the government in the fiscal year 2023-2024 is to consolidate fiscal discipline by maintaining appropriate level of borrowing and prudent budget execution. In this regard, Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, the government's long-term debt management objective will be to raise adequate level of financing at a reduced cost and reduced risk. In addition, we will continue to pursue strategies to ensure that the national public debt is maintained at sustainable levels. Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, with respect to borrowing, Ministry of Finance and Planning shall solicit money from credible lenders to finance the fiscal gap, while refraining from financing the fiscal the deficit through borrowing from the Bank of South Sudan, which is always inflationary. In this regard, the Minister of Finance and Planning shall reintroduce the Treasury bills as a way to boost government capacity in raising revenue from domestic and the public, which is not inflationary in nature. Treasury bills are short-term financial instruments issued by governments with a maturity period of a year or less. Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, with regard to development aid, the government will work with our development partners to improve aid architecture with the objective to ensure that development aid is aligned with the government priorities and to ensure regular monitoring and evaluation, as well as prepare reporting on the aid effectiveness. On the structural reforms in the budget, in the fiscal year budget of 2023-2024, Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, in July 2021, the Council of Ministers approved the Public Financial Management Reform Strategy. Public financial management will be critical in supporting not only good governance, but also for effective and efficient delivery of the essential goods and services to our citizens. Our government will continue the PFM reforms program and the full operationalization of the amended laws and regulations relating to public financial management. Let me now come to the figures of the budget for 2023-2024. Of course, the full details are in the budget book, but just giving here the highlights of or the summary of what is contained in the budget book. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, the projected revenue for the fiscal year 2023-2024 amounts to 1,837,840,803 pounds, while the proposed spending stands at around 2,105,441,619 pounds. This means that we will have a deficit of about 267,141,816 pounds. This deficit is about 4.6% of our gross national product, GDP. This is the amount which we will have to finance through borrowing from non-inflationary sources. Let me come to the details of this revenue that I've just mentioned. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, out of the gross revenue of SSP 1.8 trillion, an amount of 1.5, I'm just rounding up the figures, an amount of 1.5 trillion is from the oil revenue, and 245 billion.3 will come from non-oil revenue. And then we have about 56.1 or 56.2 will come in forms of grants. And of course, as I said there, the deficit is still there, about 267 billion. The total oil production is projected at 132,362 barrels per day in the fiscal year 2023-2024, down from 150 barrels per day in the fiscal year 2022-2023. The projected reduction of 17,638 barrels per day in oil production is due to depletion of some oil wells, as well as the effects of flood experience from 2021-2022. Government profit share in the oil production is 44%. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, out of the gross oil revenue of 1.5 trillion, the government has provided for a direct transfers to mandatory payments of 320 billion, of which, so the mandatory payment of 320 billion is broken down as follows. 173.1 billion will be in the transfers and fees to Sudan. And then transfers to oil producing states, administrative areas, that is the 2%, will amount to 30.7 billion. Payment to communities, that is the 3%, will amount to 46 billion. Transfers to Ministry of Petroleum, that is the 3%, will amount also to 46 billion. Then retention by the by the NRA is around 24.5 billion. Right, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, non-oil revenue are projected at around, as I said, 245 billion in this fiscal year. The projected increase in the non-oil revenue is on account of the tax administration reforms undertaken by the National Revenue Authority, which include digitalization of tax collection, broadening of the tax base, and the proposal to fully deploy National Revenue Authority staff in all the non-tax revenue collecting institutions. In addition, we have proposed some adjustments in the fees structures for some of the non-oil revenue categories, as well as cancellation of the tax exemptions which are outside the law by the Ministry of Finance and Planning. We have already issued a circular to cancel all the non-statutory tax exemptions. These proposals are included in the financial bill for the fiscal year 2023-2024. It is essential, therefore, that the House passes the financial bill alongside the budget so that we have a legal basis for our revenue estimates. Now I come to the expenditure. Right Honorable Speaker, what I just mentioned was the mandatory expenditure. Let's now come to the budget expenditure. The total expenditure proposed for the fiscal year 2023-2024 is 2.1 trillion pounds. That is the government spending. Out of this, 455 billion is budgeted for salaries and wages. 222.7 billion is budgeted for the use of goods and services. And then 541.8 billion is allocated to cater for capital expenditure. These are our usual budget chapters. Then others is about 1.6 billion. But there are certain spending that I wanted to highlight more. That is, as our theme for this budget is consolidation of peace and stabilization of the economy, we are allocating 50 billion pounds for peace implementation. The last budget, the peace implementation was budgeted for 12 billion. We have now tripled it, and we have increased it to, or more than tripled, to 50 billion. Also, we have also budgeted this time, or increased the budget for contingency. As we know now, with the events that are happening in Sudan, we have a lot of influx of refugees and our returnees. So we didn't have enough budget in the emergency at that time. So here in the contingency, we have put 37.8 or 0.9 billion for contingency budget. Also, we have, based on the directives and the speech of the President last time when he addressed the Parliament, and the reopening of the Parliament, he directed that we budget for Constituency Development Fund. So this time we have put a budget of 47.9 billion pounds for CDF, or Constituency Development Fund. Also, we have made a budget of 151 billion for transfers to states and administrative areas. And also, we have a budget of 32 billion for salary arrears of our foreign missions. These are the highlights of the budget, but as I said, all the details are stated in the budget book. In conclusion, Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, I wanted to sincerely emphasize that the macroeconomic challenges which our country faces today requires sound economic policies to move forward, or to move towards stability and sustainable economic recovery. I am confident that the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget proposal will consolidate peace and stabilize the economy. which should lead us to realize economic growth and development. We need to commit ourselves to ensure that public resources are used efficiently and effectively for the benefit of all South Sudanese. Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, with this presentation, allow me to table the draft national budget, the appropriation bill, and the financial bill for the fiscal year 2023-2024 for the deliberation and approval by this August House. Thank you for listening.